I will never say my real name, not for mystery, but for survival. For 25 years, I have carried something that should not exist outside a specific place. I worked for men who control entire economies and discovered that the origin of their power is not human. It is an ancient, silent, living agreement. I grew up poor, believing that effort explained everything. My father said those who work hard win. I believed him until I realized that some always win, no matter the cost. The difference was not talent or luck. It was access. Something operated above common rules, ignoring morals, laws, and any acceptable limit. When the crisis took my job, my dignity, and almost my family, the offer appeared. Private security, absolute secrecy, absurd pay. I signed because I needed to. Only later did I understand that no one enters by courage. They enter by necessity. That is the system's first filter. Those who are hungry accept any door. The island had no name. It did not appear on maps. Too beautiful, too silent. There were no villages, boats, or trails. Only buildings, cameras, and men trained not to ask questions. At the center, a dark stone building looked older than the rest. They told me never to approach it. They said it too seriously. On the first night, I heard sounds coming from there. They were not clear voices. They were rhythms, cadences that followed no known language. My body reacted before my mind. Nausea, cold, alertness. I asked another guard. He said ignoring it was part of the salary. After that, he avoided looking at me for days. The guests arrived in private jets. I recognized faces from magazines, economic forums, newspaper covers. During the day, they talked about markets and technology. At night, they walked together in silence toward the central building. Always at the same time, always with the same expression. Expectation, not anxiety, trained expectation. In the second year I was promoted, they said I was trustworthy. I began circulating through internal areas. I saw underground corridors, reinforced doors, and symbols carved into ancient walls. They were not decoration, they functioned. Light seemed to avoid them. In certain points, the air grew denser, as if something breathed below. There was an old man who arrived daily at 6. He wore simple black clothes and carried red vials. No one called him by name. They just opened a path. I saw executives tremble near him, not from fear, from respect, like subordinates before someone who knows the real terms of an irrevocable contract. On the fourth night, a door was left ajar. I do not know if it was a mistake or permission. I peeked inside. The hall was circular, deep, far too ancient. At the center, a structure drained dark liquid through carved channels. Around it, the most powerful men in the world knelt. They were not praying, they were negotiating. And something answered. I stepped away without making a sound, but I knew at that moment I had been seen, not by human eyes. In the following days, everything seemed normal, too normal. That was when I understood. The true pact does not begin at the altar. It begins when someone sees and continues living as if nothing had happened. In the days that followed, I noticed small changes. Colleagues avoided certain corridors. One guest left the island earlier than planned, pale, sweating, talking to himself. They said he fell ill. At night, I heard a short scream from the sublevel, then restrained applause. It was the first time I felt ashamed to breathe. I met a young man among the guests, a recent heir. He trembled like I had in my first week. He tried to talk to me, asked if it was normal. I did not answer. That night I saw him taken downstairs. In the morning he smiled confidently, arrogantly, decisively. Something had been removed from him, something essential. I began secretly noting dates. Every time there was a ritual, something happened outside the island days later. Markets reacted, governments fell, wars began. It was no coincidence. It was response. What I saw was not a cult. It was machinery. An ancient system adjusting the world like someone turning pressure valves. A Colombian guard asked too many questions. He vanished on the third day. They said he was transferred. There were no transfers there. The silence afterward was absolute. No one commented. I understood that survival meant pretending people ceased to exist naturally. The island did not only kill bodies, it erased traces, memories, and bonds. In the second week, I dreamed of the circular hall. In the dream, I was kneeling. I woke with a metallic taste in my mouth. I spent the entire day avoiding mirrors. Something in me had changed. Not physically. It was as if a part of me had been noticed, registered, as if my name were now on some list. I tried to resign. I was summoned to a white room with no windows. They showed photos of my family at home, dates, times, routines. They said I was valuable and that valuables are not lost, they are preserved. I left understanding I was not an employee. I was collateral, a living insurance against leaks. That was when I met Silas. Another Argentine. He still believed that reporting would solve things. He spoke of justice, press, police. I listened in silence. That night he cried, saying he had seen children taken down to the lower level. I begged him to forget. He said he could not. At that moment I knew he would not leave. During one ritual something went wrong. Unscheduled screams, running. Silas appeared running, calling out to God. He was captured before reaching the outer light. The applause that night was longer. The next day they said he suffered an accident. The world kept spinning, unaware of the correction that had been applied. After that, something broke inside me. I began obeying automatically, cleaning, watching, staying silent. It was easier not to feel. The pact does not require faith, it requires adaptation. I understood why some prosper there. They are not smarter, they are emptier. The absence of guilt is the true passport upward. When my contract ended, they allowed my departure, not out of mercy, because I already knew too much. I fled with my family weeks later. I changed names, countries, stories. Even so, I sometimes wake thinking I hear those ancient rhythms. Maybe it is not memory. Maybe it is just the system checking if I still exist. In the first months away from the island, I thought the fear would fade. The opposite happened. Without orders, my mind began filling the gaps. I recognized patterns in news, in repeated speeches, in synchronized collapses. I knew when something had been paid. The world reacted like a body, obeying a hidden stimulus. I avoided speaking about the past even to myself, but the dreams returned, not as memories, but as meetings. People I had never met discussed numbers while something waited for an answer. I woke exhausted, as if I had participated. I began to suspect the pact does not require physical presence. Being accepted once is enough. I started observing those who never lose. Companies that grow during crises, men who always land on their feet. It was not brilliance, it was protection. An invisible margin of error allowed, as if bad decisions were corrected before causing real damage. The system forgives its operators, the rest are disposable. I tried to convince myself it was paranoia. Then a name appeared in the news, one of the men from the island, officially dead. Days later, his son assumed positions, contracts, influence. The succession was instant, no mourning. The pact does not allow interruptions. Blood changes hands, not function. I began writing to stay sane. Short notes, without dates. The more I wrote, the harder it became to stop, as if something demanded registration. On certain nights, sentences appeared ready. They were not mine. They were too cold for a survivor. That was when I feared the text was not a denunciation, but an extension. I watched global crises emerge with mathematical precision. There was no chaos, there was sequence. Each event opened space for another. Fear followed by promise, promise followed by obedience. It was modern liturgy, no ancient symbols in sight, only graphs, speeches, and numbers. The altar had learned to speak the world's language. Then I realized the initial mistake. I thought the pact needed secrecy. It does not. It needs normalization. The more absurd becomes routine, the more efficient it gets. People adapt quickly. They accept almost anything if presented as inevitable. The altar does not impose. It exhausts until resistance seems useless. I tried distancing myself from news. It did not work. The pattern appeared in casual conversations, in small decisions, as if everything leaned slightly in the same direction, a constant push, almost imperceptible. I understood the Pact operates on micro scales. It does not control everything, only enough to never lose control. I began to distrust my own memory. Dates shifted, dreams mixed with facts. Maybe it was always like this. Maybe I need to believe there was an island to avoid accepting something worse. That the system was not born in a place, but in a choice repeated billions of times by ordinary people avoiding the... Today, I do not know if I fled or was dismissed. I do not know if I write out of courage or permission. I only know something follows each line. If this account continues to exist, it may be a flaw or a test. Either way, the Pact observes, and it always learns from those who try to explain it too much, extra padrón. I began noticing strange lapses, passages written that I did not remember producing, cold, technical sentences like reports. They did not feel like confession, but manual. I deleted some. They returned, with small corrections, as if someone reviewed my text while I slept. That was when real fear arrived. In one of those reappearing passages, there was a warning. It said every structure needs controlled exceptions to remain stable. Witnesses function as valves. They release narrative pressure. I understood too late. Maybe I am not a flaw. Maybe I'm a tool. A permitted story meant to contain worse ones. I watched a financial collapse announced as surprise. I had dreamed it weeks before. Same numbers, same speeches. The dream did not predict details, only direction. That frightened me more than any ritual. If the Pact anticipates probable futures, then it reacts before they exist. Control begins before choice. I began avoiding people. I feared saying the wrong thing aloud. Certain words seemed to attract attention. Not human attention, something older. Silence became protection. I understood why so many prefer not to know. Knowledge here does not liberate, it marks. And marks do not fade, they only hide under layers of routine. There was a day I considered returning. I thought maybe accepting would be easier, less pain, less fear. The Pact offers comfort in exchange for surrender. It does not promise happiness. It promises stability. That is the true attraction. Those who live in constant fear grow tired of resisting. I almost yielded. That same day, I dreamed of Silas. He was not screaming, not suffering, just watching, empty. He said resisting did not save him, only delayed things. I woke crying, but not knowing for whom. Maybe for myself. Maybe for realizing courage and stubbornness are different things before a patient system. I then realized the Pact does not need to destroy opponents. It only needs to integrate them as examples. Some become warnings, others become stories. Maybe that is what I am now. A warning disguised as denunciation. The system learns from every reaction, adjusts discourse, rhythm, permissions. Nothing here is improvised, not even fear. I began doubting the altar itself. Maybe it does not exist as a place. Maybe it is only the shape my mind gave to understand something diffuse, a symbolic center for a distributed process. If so, destroying islands is useless. The Pact lives in daily decisions accepted without question. That changes everything. Terror ceases to be external, it becomes internal. If the system depends on small choices, then each person sustains a part. The altar would only be the first formalization. The rest came later, normalized, diluted. Maybe it was always like this. Maybe I only saw the concentrated version. If this conclusion is correct, then the Pact does not fall through exposure. It falls through continuous refusal, through choices that do not maximize fear or advantage. That is harder than fighting monsters. Monsters are clear, systems are not. They ask for silent collaboration, and almost everyone accepts every day without noticing. After that realization, everything lost sharpness. There were no clear villains anymore, only accumulated choices. I revisited moments on the island and saw how many times I could have said no. Few, but they existed. The Pact does not always force. Sometimes it only watches who yields without being pushed. I reread everything I had written since the beginning. The tone shifted gradually. At first there was fear, then anger. Now there was something worse, understanding. Understanding brings no relief. It brings responsibility. If the system works because it is accepted, then the fault is not only at the top, it seeps through every level. I remembered the first contract. No one threatened me that day. They offered money and silence. I accepted, not out of evil, but necessity. The Pact begins like that, not with blood, but with justification. When blood appears, the choice was made long before. I began testing small refusals, turning off the news, avoiding alarmist speeches, not repeating ready-made phrases. The effect was strange. Less anxiety, but more isolation. I realized the system punishes those who do not react as expected, not with violence, but with subtle exclusion. Resistance has a real social cost. I started observing people around me. Tired friends, irritated, always busy, everyone trapped in artificial urgencies. The Pact does not need public worship. It needs minds too exhausted to question. Collective fatigue is the greatest modern sacrifice. Invisible, continuous, accepted as normal. Sometimes I wonder if writing this helps or harms. If it warns or anesthetizes, perhaps the Pact allows certain narratives to create the illusion of freedom. A world where everything can be said, but nothing changes. That possibility frightens me more than censorship. It means speaking is not enough. Still, I continue, because stopping would mean accepting that there is no way out at all. I would rather be wrong trying than collaborate in silence. If this text becomes just more content, the Pact wins. If it causes a real pause in someone, maybe it loses a bit of efficiency. Sometimes that is all there is. I do not expect to awaken masses. That is fantasy. Ancient systems do not fall that way. They weaken when many small gears stop turning perfectly, when delays appear, when choices do not follow the script. The Pact hates imprecision. It does not yield predictable results. Perhaps the island still exists. Perhaps it never did. Today, that matters less. The true center is spread out. In companies, governments, routines, the altar was decentralized. Each person carries a part. That explains why destroying it seems impossible. No one wants to admit they sustain it. I reached an uncomfortable conclusion. The Pact does not need to be defeated. It needs to be made useless, costly, inefficient. That only happens when human choices stop producing fear as return, when the cost outweighs the gain. Until then, the system continues, silent, profitable, fed by daily collaboration. I began feeling something like inverted surveillance, not someone watching me, but waiting for reaction, as if the system tested limits. Small provocations appeared, exaggerated news, manufactured conflicts, recycled fear. Those who reacted fed it. Those who ignored seemed invisible. Perhaps invisibility is the first real freedom. I recalled the old man on the island saying results mattered more than beliefs. It was not faith, it was efficiency. Now I understand. The Pact measures emotional return. If fear does not generate obedience, it adjusts the stimulus. When there is no response, the method loses value. Ancient systems die when they stop yielding. I began noticing people who escape, not heroes. Ordinary, discreet people who do not buy urgencies. They do not defeat the system, but they do not strengthen it. They live at the edge of noise. Perhaps they are tolerated statistical errors or seeds of something new the Pact cannot yet calculate. There were days when the text stopped asking to be written. Silence returned to normal. That scared me more than the interference. Maybe I crossed a threshold, or maybe the system lost interest. Abandonment is also a form of control. When no one watches, everything feels too safe. Reviewing everything, I see that the greatest terror was not the altar. It was the naturalness with which everyone accepted it. The Pact thrives because it offers simple explanations for complex pain. Blame crises, enemies, luck, never choices, never structure. As long as we accept easy explanations, the system remains invisible. I do not know if this text will be read as warning or entertainment. That ambiguity haunts me. The Pact loves when fear becomes consumption. Still, I leave the words as they are. If someone pauses for a minute, breathes and chooses differently, something will already have failed below. I learned there is no neutral position. One either reinforces or wears down the system. Even exhaustion can be resistance if it does not turn into resignation. The Pact needs automatic adhesion. Thinking is tiring, but it breaks rhythm. Rhythm is the heart of control. Perhaps I exaggerated. Perhaps I saw patterns where none exist. That doubt is honest. But even so, living with more attention was never a mistake. If none of this is real, the worst result is a less manipulable life. If it is real, then every conscious pause is a small delay in the machinery. I do not seek agreement, I seek friction. Friction creates heat, noise, delay. The Pact hates delays. It depends on predictability. When human choices become less predictable, the cost rises. And systems that become too costly are eventually abandoned, even the most ancient ones. Closing this part, I leave one minimal certainty. Control does not sustain itself without participation. Withdrawing participation does not require confrontation, only continuous awareness. It is not easy, it is not fast, but it is possible. And it may be the only exit that never required an altar. After everything, fear changed shape. It was no longer panic, but constant attention. I began observing automatic reactions, including my own. The Pact lives in them. Each time someone responds without thinking, something is fed. There is no visible celebration, only silent continuity, efficient, almost elegant. I realized the system does not fear isolated denunciation. It fears mass habit change. Words scare little. Different behaviors scare more. When people stop reacting as expected, predictions fail. Accumulated failures create costs. Costs break ancient structures, even those that seem eternal. I remembered the island as a prototype, a concentrated laboratory. There, everything was explicit because few saw it. In the open world, the same model operates diluted. Fewer symbols, more routine, less visible blood, more daily exhaustion. The Pact matured. It became discreet because efficiency does not need spectacle. Some nights I still dream of the circular hall, but now it appears empty. No altar, no men kneeling, only aligned chairs and cold light. I wake with the sense that the ritual already happened before I arrived. Perhaps the future works like this. Decisions made before consciousness reaches them. There are those who confuse freedom with choosing between given options. The Pact loves that. It offers pre-calculated paths and calls them decisions. The real threat emerges when someone refuses the entire game, does not choose between doors, leaves the room. That does not make headlines, but it disrupts deep predictions. I came to believe the greatest sacrifice demanded today is not blood, it is lifetime. Fragmented attention, permanent urgency, accumulated fatigue. Every stolen minute weakens discernment. The Pact thrives where no one has energy to think beyond the next imposed fear. Perhaps that is why conscious silence is so disturbing. Not the silence of fear, but of choice. Pausing, not reacting, not sharing. Small gestures that yield no data or emotion. This creates dead zones for the system. Spaces where it cannot measure, predict, or profit. If one day they ask where everything began, many will point to islands, rituals, or specific men. They will be wrong and right at the same time. The pact always begins when someone trades consciousness for comfort. The rest are structures built to scale that initial choice. I do not consider myself free, only less predictable. Perhaps that is what remains, not breaking the system, but escaping the most obvious statistics, living outside the main script. That does not bring down the pact, but it reduces its efficiency. Sometimes surviving is already a form of silent resistance. If this text ends here or continues, it matters little. The essential has already been said. The greatest terror is not what controls the world, but how much we collaborate without noticing. When that collaboration diminishes, even slowly, something ancient begins to fail, and failures are the beginning of every end. After that understanding, I felt less fear and more responsibility. Not heroic responsibility, but everyday responsibility. Each small choice seemed to weigh more. The pact does not react to grand gestures. It reacts to subtle deviations. That is why real changes are silent and almost always invisible to those seeking spectacle. I realized the system does not need to win every time. It only needs to win enough. It accepts controlled losses, isolated criticism, even sterile rebellions. All of this is anticipated. What is not anticipated is conscious indifference, not apathy, but refusal to play emotionally. That creates failures difficult to correct. I began noticing when fear was induced. Repeated headlines, exaggerated tones, artificial urgency. The pact speaks loudly to hide the emptiness of the message. When I lowered the volume, little real content remained. Much noise. Silence exposes this fragility. That is why it is so fiercely fought. There were days when nothing happened. No crisis, no commotion. Those days seemed more dangerous to the system than any revolt. Normality without fear is anti-fuel. It generates no useful data. It produces no obedience. Perhaps that is why it is so rare and quickly interrupted by new urgencies. I no longer believe in absolute endings. The pact does not end. It changes form, weakens here, strengthens there. Vigilance must be continuous but not paranoid. Attention without despair. This balance is difficult. The system bets we will fail at it. Sometimes we do. Other times we do not. If someone expects me to offer a clear solution, I cannot. There is no manual. Any formula becomes a product and is absorbed. The only path I saw working is personal and variable. Thinking before reacting. Choosing before accepting. It seems little, but the pact is built on the opposite. Perhaps my story is only that. A record of transition, of someone who saw the concentrated version of control and then recognized its diffuse form. The island was real, but not essential. The essential thing is the human habit of outsourcing consciousness in exchange for immediate comfort. If you reach this point, I do not ask for belief, I ask for attention. Observe when something tries to extract automatic reaction. Observe who profits from your fear. Observe the fatigue that does not pass. These are the modern traces of the pact. They do not lead to an altar. They lead to routines accepted without question. I no longer write with urgency. I write with possible precision. The system feeds on extremes. Conscious calm is corrosive. Perhaps that is why it is so difficult to maintain. Everything conspires to break it, but when it exists, even briefly, something fails in the ancient machinery. Closing this stage, I leave the most uncomfortable idea. The pact does not dominate us because it is too strong. It dominates because it is too convenient. Questioning it requires constant effort. Accepting it requires only following along. As long as we choose the easier path, it will continue working. When that changes, even slowly, everything changes. I began to notice something disturbing. The system reacts faster to indifference than to revolt. Anger is predictable, apathy is manageable. But silent attention breaks metrics. When someone observes without reacting, the pact loses reference. Without reference, precise adjustment becomes impossible. I remembered the first ritual I witnessed. What marked me most was not the blood, but the naturalness. Those men did not tremble. They negotiated. Today I understand that real terror is not in the grotesque, but in efficiency. When something terrible works well, it tends to repeat itself, and the world repeats what works. On certain days, I feel the urge to forget everything, to live as before. The system offers that comfort. Pretending normality is rewarded with less friction. Resisting is exhausting. Questioning isolates. Perhaps that is why most people choose not to see, not out of ignorance, but emotional self-preservation. I do not condemn those who do not want to know. The pact depends on that. It does not require cruelty, only fatigue. The more tired the mind, the easier it is to accept ready-made explanations. Modern terror does not scream. It rocks you gently. It promises rest in exchange for attention, surrendered without filters. Sometimes I wonder if the system also ages. If structures this old can grow tired, maybe they require increasingly stronger stimuli because the old ones no longer yield results. That would explain the constant escalation. More fear, more urgency, more shock. Human tolerance increases, the cost rises. If that is so, the pact faces a limit, not moral but technical. A world saturated with fear stops reacting. When everything is a crisis, nothing is. That thought gives me restrained hope. Systems based on stimulus collapse when the stimulus loses effect. Perhaps that is why we see so much exaggeration. The pact tries to compensate for loss of impact. It increases volume. But volume does not create meaning, only noise. And prolonged noise creates deafness. When no one listens anymore, control must change or disappear. I do not know if I will be alive when that happens. It does not matter. What matters is understanding that no system is absolute, not even the oldest one. They depend on specific conditions. When those conditions change, even pacts reveal fragility. If something in this account seems exaggerated, accept the doubt. It is healthy. Questioning even the narrator is part of refusal. The pact loves blind belief, even when it opposes it. Critical thinking is unstable ground, and it prefers solid terrain. Approaching the end, I leave one final observation. Control does not fall through direct confrontation. It falls when it stops being worth it, when maintaining the pact costs more than abandoning it. This does not happen at once. It happens choice by choice, silence by silence, attention by conscious attention. Today I understand that the greatest mistake was searching for an external enemy. That comforts, it gives shape to fear. The truth is less dramatic. The pact survives because it offers emotional shortcuts. Every time someone chooses immediate relief over uncomfortable clarity, something ancient gains silent strength. Looking back, I realize I was never special. I was only too close to the concentrated version of the system. Others live the same logic without symbols, without islands. Control does not need to be seen to work. It only needs to be repeated until it feels too natural to question. Perhaps the pact does not even care if people believe in it. Belief is optional. Collaboration is not. People who deny its existence still feed it if they react as predicted. The system does not seek faith. It seeks predictability. That is what makes it so difficult to fight. There is not a day when I do not ask whether writing this changes anything. Perhaps it changes nothing. Perhaps it changes someone. Systems do not collapse from great revelations, but from the accumulation of small failures. If this text creates a single real failure, it has fulfilled its purpose. I realized that true courage is not in denouncing, but in sustaining different choices long enough. The pact bets on exhaustion. It waits for fatigue to win. Resisting is not always fighting. Sometimes it is simply not reacting when everyone else does. If there is a future with less control, it will not be because someone destroyed the system. It will be because it became obsolete, unable to predict, unable to profit, unable to respond to behaviors that no longer follow the old script. Perhaps the Pact will survive for centuries more, perhaps not. Its time is not ours, but no mechanism lives without return. When collaboration diminishes, even slowly, something begins to creak. And creaks always precede ruptures. Do not treat this account as prophecy. Treat it as an imperfect mirror. See what resonates and what does not. The Pact strengthens when we accept ready-made narratives. It weakens when we choose to think, even without clear conclusions. If someone asks what I saw on that island, I will say I saw a shortcut working. I saw men trading humanity for stability. I saw that the price seemed small at first. It always does. Only later do you realize there is no receipt for return. This is the end of what I can say. The rest is not written. If something here stays with you after the silence, observe how you react to fear tomorrow. That is where everything begins or ends, not at the altar, not in the Pact, but in the next seemingly small choice. If this story made you pause, question, or feel uncomfortable, then you're not alone. Subscribe to the channel, not for entertainment, but to stay aware. New stories, deeper truths, and narratives they prefer you never hear. Stay conscious, stay watching, subscribe.